After losing both legs to an IED in Afghanistan, Rob Jones picked up a marker in his hospital bed and wrote 3 words on the whiteboard in front of him: survive, recover, live. What does it take to survive the hardest hits, recover when life knocks you flat, and live a life of strength, purpose, and brotherhood?
It's the only thing that empowers you to solve problems in your life is if you take ownership of your problems, you can take ownership of your life.
Dr. Kevin here, and I just want to personally thank you for being a part of this community. It means the world to us, and without you, we wouldn't exist. The only favor that I will ever ask is that you like or subscribe to the Work Ready podcast, as this ensures that we can continue to grow this community and bring these amazing guests and conversations to you each week. Thank you so much. Hello and welcome to the Work Ready podcast. It's my honor to welcome Rob Jones to the show. Rob Jones is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, father, double above knee amputee, Paralympic rower, endurance athlete, author, speaker, and leadership instructor with Echelon Front. Rob, so grateful to have you on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you and be one of the inaugural guests on the podcast. This is exciting.
I hear also, Rob, you're a stand-up comedian, so you're not only a warrior, but that probably plays into your speaking ability. Tell me a little bit more about your stand-up comedy.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm an active stand-up comedian. I have done it before. Well, the genesis of it is I grew up watching stand-up comedy. I would wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning in elementary school and watch this show called Evening at the Improv. And I imagine I didn't get about 98% of the jokes because I was just a little kid and it was an adult show. But, I would say I just always grew up trying to be funny, always wanting to be funny. And so stand-up comedy was always something that had interested me. And then when I got wounded, I got this email. I was in the hospital. I got this email from Wounded Warrior Project saying that they had these producers that wanted to do a documentary about teaching wounded veterans how to do stand-up comedy. It was basically a call for auditions. So I did a little video and sent it in to them, and they selected me as one of the 5 veterans. And over the course of about a year and a half, we produced this documentary called Comedy Warriors, where we would write some stand-up comedy, and then they would fly us out to Los Angeles, and they'd rent out one of the bigger clubs like the Improv or the Laugh Factory, and we would perform for pretty well-known stand-up comedians like Bob Saget, B.J. Novak, Zach Galifianakis, Lewis Black, people like that, and they would give us some tips. And that evening we would go up and we'd do a 5-minute set for the main show, and that was a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed doing that, just like I thought I would. But I was also training for the Paralympics at the time, so stand-up comedy took a back seat to the Paralympics. And then I kind of came back to stand-up comedy after the bike ride across the country, and I was doing some open mics in Washington, D.C. Then I was also training for the month of marathon, so one of those also had to take a backseat. And again, I had to put the stand-up comedy in the backseat, and I haven't really returned to it. But yeah, certainly my natural desire to want to make people laugh certainly plays into just about everything that I do in life. But also as a leadership instructor at Echelon Front, I truly believe that if I'm teaching a workshop or if I'm doing a keynote and people aren't at least enjoying themselves, at least if they're not engaged in the story part of it, if they're not engaged in what I'm saying, if they're not having a good time, they're not going to learn because they're going to be bored. And so I think that, flexing that funny bone that I have is a way that I can keep them engaged, build a good relationship with them very quickly, and thus increase the learning potential of anything that I'm doing.
Yeah, no, that came through in that presentation that you gave too. I mean, it was just, you just had those little hooks in there that cause people to laugh, and it really draws people in and shows humility. But how have you seen?
And I use that as a gauge. Usually, when I get up there, if I introduce myself and for a kind of a standard keynote for a regular workshop, I'll usually get up there and say, my name's Rob Jones. I was a combat engineer in the Marine Corps. I was supposed to find IEDs, and as you can see, I wasn't very good at it. And I can usually gauge, like if that gets a big laugh, then I'm saying, okay, this crowd's going to be, this audience is going to be really engaging. I can do, but if it doesn't get anything, or if it gets very little, I go, okay, I'm going to have to do a little bit more work to establish a rapport so that we can have this back and forth during the keynote. That I like to employ. So you can kind of use that as a gauge to get things kicked off. And I learned that from Steve Martin. Steve Martin, I read his book Born Standing Up, and he in that book he talked about how he hated it when comedians just come out and say, "How's everybody doing?" And instead he would like to have a line, a really quick line to get things going. And I kind of use that philosophy as well. Like the first thing that you say, the first words that come out of your mouth should engage the audience in some way, and it kind of establishes, this rapport, and it sets the standard for the rest of the time that you're going to be talking to them. So
I love that. I'm gonna have to read that book. I think
it's a great book.
Oh yeah.
There's a
I
lot
think
of stuff in stand-up comedy that applies to what I do as leadership instructor as well, just in terms of philosophy. You want to go too long on your brief, but you can't go too long. But you can't. You have to go this certain amount of time that your brief should last before people start getting bored and the engagement drops off. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that from stand-up comedy that you can tie into just being a teacher.
and the skill of improv too, just thinking on your feet and being able to adapt.
Yeah,
So, well, we are going to definitely come back to this thread about comedy, laughter, thinking on your feet, and how
yeah,
you
yeah.
lead other teams as we go through this conversation. In preparation for this podcast, I listened to a ton of your stuff. I mean, man, anyone who wants to learn more about Rob Jones, just type it into YouTube or Google, and you'll come up with some amazing resources. I was telling you before we started, I think I've listened to about 9 hours of you. I feel like you're a great friend. Just riding my bike, listening to Jocko. Yeah, I think you may be one of the only three-peat guests on the Jocko podcast, which, I mean, that is definitely a feather in your cap. That's
Yeah.
my favorite podcast to listen to. So, why don't you? I want to break this up into three different chapters. So we're going to start with chapter one, and that's your experience as a Marine Corps combat engineer. And I'd love to have you just set the stage for us in terms of like what caused you, first of all, to even go into the Marine Corps, and then tell us a little bit more about what your role was, and we'll dive down that.
Yeah, I'll try and do that briefly. I was in college. I was at Virginia Tech. I was a junior at Virginia Tech, and my major was computer science. So when I got to Virginia Tech, I wanted to be a video game programmer. That's all I wanted to do. But unfortunately, I did not have a good work ethic. I didn't have the work ethic that it required to do well. So I spent too much time playing video games, not enough time learning how to make them and learning how to be a good programmer. So by the time my junior year came around, I was basically failing. I mean, a low D. And I remember the catalyst was I had my two main computer science courses. After the first exam, I think I failed both the first exams in both those courses, and I realized at that point there's no way I'm going to get out of college in 4 years. I'm going to have to be here for 5 years, and that just made me feel like a total loser. So I had a little bit of an existential crisis at that point, and I decided that instead of being a computer scientist, I should go to film school. So I started looking at that, but that was super expensive. And then I started looking for some other stuff, and I just so happened to be talking to my friend Matt on AOL Instant Messenger, and he had the same kind of realization a year before, and he joined the Marine Corps because his dad was in the Marines. And he basically just told me that it was the best thing he'd ever done. And so that made me curious, and I started researching the Marine Corps, and I kind of liked what I saw. So I went down to this library and I got the first Marine Corps book I could find, which is this book called Brotherhood of Heroes about the Battle of Peleliu in World War II. And I read that book, and it just clicked with me. All these things that I was missing in my life. Those guys had courage. They were selfless individuals, and they were all a part of this really powerful brotherhood. And I didn't have any of those things. I wasn't particularly courageous. I was mostly thought about myself, and I didn't have a group. I didn't have a brotherhood, a tribe of people around me when I was at college. And so I figured the best way for me to get those things that I needed were was to join the Marine Corps and go try and fight in a war. And so I think 2 days after I finished the book, I went down to the recruiter's office in the next town over, walked into the office, and said I want to join the Marine Corps, and that was pretty much the easiest recruiting job that recruiter ever had, because I think I was down at MEPS, 2 days later getting sworn in, and then I called my parents and told them what I did.
I'm sure they love that.
Yeah, they weren't. Yeah, I think my dad was they were both very surprised, because it probably came out of left field for both of them. But they didn't really have a choice in the matter, because I was 19 or 20. But they were supportive once I kind of explained to them what my reasoning was. And
That's
so yeah,
awesome.
and then you asked me what does a combat engineer do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about that.
There's
I
a
mean, it's such a
multitude.
unique role. I'm like, man.
Yeah, there's a multitude of things that a combat engineer can do. There's basically three specialties. The first one is building things, like building forward operating bases and that kind of stuff. The second specialty would be the air wings, so they're building runways and that kind of stuff. So a lot of construction things. And then the third one is destroying stuff, which is using explosives, employing and defeating minefields, building obstacles using explosives and that kind of thing. And that's what
Like every
I
kid's dream, right?
yeah, basically the
Yeah.
dream. Um, and that's what I fell into, that specialty.
Okay.
And so the way that played out in Iraq and Afghanistan was my Iraq deployment in 2008. We got a lot of training in combat engineer school about how to use mine detectors and metal detectors, because one of the things we're supposed to be able to do is get through minefields. And so naturally, that meant that we were kind of naturally positioned to be the experts in IED detection and route clearance, which was more and more important as the war went on. And so in Iraq, there weren't tons of IEDs in my area, but what they did have were weapons caches. So again, metal detectors. We would just go into an area that we got some intelligence on from the local populace that there might be some weapons buried there. We'd go through. We would sweep that entire area with our metal detector, and we'd find things like RPGs, ammunition, mortars, grenades, just all usually in burlap sacks buried in the ground. So we'd find those things and we'd hand them over to explosive ordnance disposal. But then in Afghanistan, the war is picking up in 2010, so IEDs were all over the place. And so the way that would work would be anytime we came to an area where we thought there was going to be an IED, for example, a bridge going over a river, Taliban knew that we wouldn't just be swimming across the river typically. If it was a creek, we would wade across the creek, but if it was this big body of water, we're not going to swim across in 80 pounds of gear. So we would have to use the bridge, so they would put IEDs around the mouth of that bridge, and then on the other side. And so we knew that they knew that we knew that they knew that we knew, all this kind of thing. So we
Yeah.
would just sweep to the other side every time we would go through one of these areas. And then another time where there's basically guaranteed to be an IED is if you've already found one. So they would put them usually in clusters. They put one here, one here, one here. So if one person stepped on an IED, or if you found one, there's almost guaranteed you're going to find a second or a third. So that's basically how it would work. So I would clear a way across, and I would mark a safe path. So as long as everybody knew, or as long as everybody followed the path that I delineated for them, they knew that they wouldn't be stepping on an IED.
Yeah. And when I have heard you describe this before, you call it proofing the lane. Can you maybe
Yeah,
expand on that a little bit? Because I think, I mean, proofing the lane is one thing in battle, but it just feels like, again, that's a theme of your life in terms of how you've used that as a metaphor to just, you know, serve others, love others. So yeah, I'd love to hear you expand on that.
yeah. So in IED detection and route clearance, there's the first thing you should do is clear the lane. That's what you're doing with your metal detector. You're basically developing a theory about whether or not there's an IED buried in front of you by waving your metal detector over the top, by examining it with your eyes, and developing a theory, but without actually touching anything. So in the end, you have a theory, and that theory can be 99.9% accurate, but you don't actually know if there's an IED buried in front of you. You can't possibly know that for sure, for 100% sure. So the only way to 100% guarantee that there's not an IED buried in front of you is to step on that spot. and that's what we call proofing the lane. So usually that terminology comes from uh, route clearance using tanks. So what they would do is they would clear the lane with a vehicle, and then a tank would literally just drive through with a a mine rake or a mine plow, mining up, like, shoving everything out of the way, and then finally it would drive itself over that area that it had just mine plowed, and if things exploded, then there's still a mine there. But basically, what it's doing is you're proving your theory, whether or proving or disproving your theory based upon whether or not when you step on that spot, does a mine actually explode? Does an IED explode? So that's what proofing the lane is called. What it does. That's what it is. That's the theory behind it. And so the way that applies to life is there's a lot of things that people are unsure about whether or not they can do, or things that just haven't been done before. And and also just a lot of the times people are waiting for somebody to do something. And so what proofing the lane in life is being the person that's gonna go out there and do the thing, or take the first step so that other people can follow you, and also unfortunately having to be the one that has to endure the consequences of taking that action, the difficulties that are associated with it, and the burden of responsibility of being the one that's going to lead the way through this difficult situation, or lead the way uh, to determine whether or not something is possible. And if you can do that, then a lot of the time, people will see that. They'll see that what you did is possible, and then you just kind of open the floodgates to a bunch of other people being able to do it too.
Rob, at the start of this interview, you said that when you were in college, you didn't have a strong purpose, you didn't have strong discipline, you didn't have a
Mm.
tribe or community. How did you go from that to now you're putting your life on the line, proofing the lane for the rest of your team, your squad, as you're out there? I'm just so interested in that development.
Yeah, well, it started with the recognition that I didn't have those things.
Yeah.
So I had a enough self-reflection that I saw that I didn't have that stuff. And then I read the book and identified, oh, that's what I need. So I, identified what I needed. I realized I didn't have it, and I set a course to achieving it. And yeah, joining the Marine Corps and going to fight in a war is probably the best way that you can develop those things. So it was through the Marine Corps and going to war and having a brotherhood of Marines that I cared about more than myself that developed those traits within me. But yeah, I mean, I learned the importance of putting the team first and of selflessness all the way back in boot camp, when if one person screwed up, the entire platoon was punished. And guess what? There were people screwing up every 5 seconds. Somebody made a mistake that would get the platoon punished. And then so I had that, and then I saw how that worked in war as well. I couldn't be thinking about myself. No Marine can be thinking about solely themselves in war, because if you do that, then you're gonna leave the enemy an opportunity to kill somebody that you care about or do
Yeah.
damage to the platoon. So you can't think about yourself at all, really.
When you're teaching leadership skills to people, and I mean, you're working with construction companies, utility companies, the frontline workers, like, what are some of the principles that you teach people in your leadership sessions when it comes to building community, building purpose, building those different things that you just talked about?
Yeah, I mean, building community and building purpose would be essentially building relationships first, primarily, because that's how, in order for any team to work together, in order for true teamwork to occur, which is when teams are supporting each other, when people are supporting each other, in order for that to occur, everybody on the team has to put the team before themselves, have to put the other people on the team before themselves. And if they don't do that, then teamwork just isn't going to happen. If I don't care, if I don't think the team is more important than me, then I'm going to be acting in my own self-interest, and I'm not going to be helping this guy because I only care about myself. Or if my department over here thinks it's the most important thing, it's more important than the whole team, then I'm not going to help this other department over here. Or this crew isn't going to help this other crew because they think they're the most important thing. So we have to be subservient to the whole team, the bigger team, in order for teamwork to be able to be effective, in order for effective teamwork to happen. And in order for that to happen, we have to actually care about the other people on the team. And the way that we care about other people on the team is by having a good relationship with them. So if I don't have any relationship whatsoever with Kevin, I don't care about his podcast. I'm not going to do my best to try and make sure he has a good podcast. But since I like you, since we have a good relationship, I want your podcast to do well. I want this podcast to be great. And here's the thing. If I do that, if I put you before myself and I make sure that your podcast is good, I'm going to benefit from that too. But that's not going to be my primary objective. My primary objective is to help you have a good podcast and to support you. But if I do that, then yes, in the end, I will also benefit. And then establishing a purpose, I would say that's the thing that I teach with that is alignment. We have to have a team, and then we have to have the goal that we're all working toward. We have to make sure that everybody on the team is working in the same direction towards that same goal. Because if I'm working towards this goal and somebody else is working towards that goal, even if we do support each other, we're going to be so far apart from each other that we can't work together effectively. So we all have to be going towards the same objective, the same mission.
I love that, Rob. I mean, it's so paradoxical because I think the tendency is when we want to be in the lead, when we want to win, it's like myself first. Like I've got to only look out for myself if we're going to do this.
Yeah, and that might work a little bit, but in the end, it's not going to be a good strategy for you because everybody else is going to see that too. And guess what? When you are looking out for yourself, when you're on a team, the rest of the team's going to see it, and then you're going to be isolated. But yeah, I mean, a lot of what we teach is counterintuitive. It goes against natural human tendencies. It's our human tendency to look out for yourself. That's what we're ingrained to do from our instincts, or look out for our tribe, our small tribe. But really, we have to overcome that and look at the bigger team. And if we can do that, then not only is the team going to benefit, but we're going to benefit. So that what we say is, if the team wins, everyone wins.
Thanks for sharing that.
Velocity is more than training. It's a safety and readiness platform trusted by companies to keep their field professionals strong, healthy, and ready for the job. Now we're launching something new, the Work Ready Community. It's the first online community built exclusively for field employees, a place to connect, learn, and lead the future of our industry. Join us and be part of the movement.
Take us back to 2010, into that moment where you made contact with the IED. But take our listeners through that experience, the impact, your first thoughts when you came back to, consciousness and realized, what had just taken place.
Yeah, you heard this story at the keynote. But my battalion, we were on a big mission. I won't go into the details of the mission. We were just all moving to the north, and we were just going to take over a bunch of Taliban territory. That was our mission for the day. And the Taliban obviously didn't want us to do that, so they had placed a bunch of, IEDs around and where we were going to be going. And the way it worked is 1 o'clock in the afternoon, my squad at the battalion halted so we could get reorganized. So my squad halted in this one spot. And then when we stepped back off, maybe 15 minutes later, within 3 seconds of us stepping off, our point man stepped on an IED. Fortunately for everybody present, it malfunctioned. So an IED is a big jug of explosives, and then inside of the IED is tucked a little blasting cap, which is about that big, about the half of the size of a Bic pen, and it's stuffed with very volatile explosives. And what's supposed to happen is an electrical charge from the pressure plate connecting the wires in the pressure plate connects to a battery. The battery goes into that blasting cap, and that electrical charge is enough to ignite or set off those volatile explosives. And then when those go off, it explodes the main charge, which is that jug of ammonium nitrate. And for whatever reason, it didn't go off appropriately. All that happened was that blasting cap exploded. But we all knew that, like I said earlier, where there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, maybe even 4. So we knew that we were essentially in the middle of this little small minefield. And it was my job to get us through because he was out there in the middle of the minefield, so I had to find a safe path through. So I stepped forward, started doing what I was talking about earlier, waving my metal detector back and forth in front of me. And in an instant, I just went from doing what I, knew how to do and what I had been doing for the last 4 months I went from being up here like this to being on my back, and I was screaming. A lot like you would hear in the movies from somebody that had been wounded. They do a pretty good job there, screaming my head off, shrieking, and my vision had been gone into a tunnel. I could see the sky, and that was about it. And it was kind of like my mind and my body had disconnected from each other. I I could tell my body was screaming and doing all these things, but I wasn't telling it to consciously. It was just doing it on its own. It was acting, primally or reacting primally to what had happened to me. But I was just kind of sitting there. I was aware of what was going on, but I wasn't controlling anything. I was just, just aware. And even in those moments where I was just barely aware, I knew what had happened. I instinctively I knew that I had stepped on an IED and that parts of my legs were going to be gone. And then after about probably 20, 30 seconds of that, I guess the endorphins got into my body and I calmed down a little bit. And then shortly after that, a combat engineer had cleared a safe path to me, and my fellow Marines were able to get to me, and they put tourniquets on my legs really quick to stop the bleeding. And then the corpsman, which is a medic in the Navy and the Marine Corps, got to me next. He gave me a shot of morphine, and that really calmed me down. And then I was able to start thinking about things, and the first thoughts I had were about the future. I didn't think I was going to be able to work out. I was going to have to stop being a Marine, which is all I really knew at that point. This is the only path that I knew forward for myself. And I figured I was going to be, an invalid being taken care of by my mom for the rest of my life. And so I just asked these guys to kill me. I said, I don't want to live like this. Just shoot me. And obviously they said, no, you're going to be fine. And then I asked them if my legs were amputated above or below the knee, and they told me they were amputated below the knee, which is probably true. But by the time I woke up, they were amputated above the knee. But they, after a couple minutes, they had called in helicopters, and they moved me over to a stretcher, and they carried that stretcher to this tank that was waiting. And then the last thing I remember before I went unconscious again was just looking up at these Marines looking down on me in the back of the tank. I know who these guys were, but they slid me in. I remember seeing their faces. And then the corpsman gave me another shot, and he said, "This is going to put you to sleep." And I went to sleep. And then I woke up in the hospital, a couple days later.
And were you transported to Germany when you woke up?
Not immediately. So
Okay.
they transported me, because that would have been, that would have taken days it took 2 days to get there. So I needed to be operated on immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So they took me from site of injury in Sang in Afghanistan to, I don't exactly, I think Camp Leatherneck, either Camp Leatherneck or Bagram. It's big bases in Afghanistan. I don't know which one I went to first. There, where they revised, they saved my life. They did a call for blood. They got me some blood and stabilized me there. Once I was stable there, went to the next base, more stabilization, more amputation revision, until finally Germany. And I think I was only in Germany for 12 hours before they had me on a plane back to America.
Thanks for sharing that. As I think about those moments, you're in shock and you're thinking about all the things that, like, the way your life is going to be impacted. And that initial thought is like, just, I don't want to go through that, shoot me.
Yeah.
We know there are a lot of people going through dark times in life. And like, what would you say to those people who may be going through one of those dark moments, as you've been through that low point to where you are today, and you have hindsight to say, man, I'm so grateful to be alive, and just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, there'd be a lot of things to say, obviously. I would say, relevant to what we just talked about, two things. And the first thing would be, you have to keep an open mind. And this is true in life, and this is true in leadership. This is one of the fundamental things that we teach in leadership, is to keep an open mind. Because the fact of the matter is, no matter how much evidence you have, no matter how good your theory is, no matter how good you are at what you do, you don't know what's going to happen. And if you close your mind and you decide what is going to happen before you even know for sure, then you're not going to see any other possibilities. You're not going to be able to listen to anybody else. You're not going to be able to work to collaborate. You're not going to be able to change your mind. You're not going to be able to shift as things happen because you've already decided that this is what's going to happen. And you've closed your mind to any other possibilities or any other opportunities. And so if you do that, you are effectively committing yourself to one thing. And if that one thing doesn't end up working out the way that you wanted it to, then you're not going to see another path, and you're not going to want to, you're not going to want to continue. And so that's what happened when I was there at site of injury. I said, "Oh, my legs just got blown off, so this now means that can't stay in the Marine Corps, not going to be able to exercise, not going to be able to do anything that I want to do. My mom's going to take care of me like I'm a baby. I'm going to be in a wheelchair forever. That is what's going to happen. No other possibility could possibly occur. So therefore, I want to die because I don't want to live that way." But if I had just been able to detach from that perspective and open my mind some and say to myself, well, maybe I won't be able to do those things. Actually, it came to pass that I can do all those things that I thought I was going to be able to do. My mom doesn't take care of me like I'm a baby. I take care of babies. If I just kept my mind open to those possibilities that maybe these things are concerns, but they're not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed to be this way. If I had been able to keep my mind open, I probably wouldn't have been asked to kill because I would have been able to see all these millions and millions of possibilities for my life that could come from stepping on an IED or that could occur after stepping on an IED. But I didn't allow myself to see that. And so I just closed my mind and I wanted to be dead. So first thing would be just you don't know what's going to happen. Even when something really, really, really bad happens to you, you don't know what's going to happen as a result of that for sure. And the only way to know is to find a new objective, find a new mission, and then pursue it and see what will happen and make it happen.
Yeah.
And the other thing would be, and we're probably going to get to this with the next story that I have a feeling you're going to want to talk about, and that would be look out for the people that you care about. Find a way that you can help the people that you care about, and that is where you're going to gain the strength to continue forward no matter what happens. And I'll leave that there because I think you're probably going to get to the next thing.
Well, and you tell the story where you're laying there in the hospital bed, and all these thoughts you've gotten past some of those, but you have anxiety about your mom coming in and seeing you, and like, what is she gonna think? And and so your initial instinct is, well, I've got to make her laugh. And this goes back to like just who you are as a person and using that as a tool. So I'd love you to tell a story about the hat.
Yeah, so when I woke up in the hospital bed, I was barely conscious. I was so, hopped up on all the medication that I think they typically try and keep you essentially anesthetized the entire time. You're not really supposed to wake up. But I did, but I was, barely conscious. But even though I was barely conscious, I had one vividly clear thought, and that was that I knew that my mom was going to be crushed when she probably already found out, but she was going to be crushed when she heard the news. And so in that moment, I instinctively tried to think of a way that I could help her with that. And the only thing I could think of was I need a funny hat. And maybe if I'm wearing this funny hat, when she sees me the first time, she'll laugh, and that's really the only thing that I can do is just show her that I'm okay. And the way that ties into what I was just talking about was even in the most dire of circumstances, you are not the only one that's being affected by what is happening to you. You have a family, you have friends, you have all these people that are equally, probably even more affected, I would say, in the case of my mom, more affected than I was, more affected than you are by your circumstances. And the only way that you can get through it is if you focus on what you can do to help them. If you stay focused on the people that you care about, maintain focus on other people, then you're naturally going to rise to the occasion and get through whatever it is that you are struggling with. But it's so hard. It's so hard in that kind of a situation, even especially in a tragic situation like this. where something really bad has happened to you, it's hard to look outwardly, but you have to stay humble. You have to put your ego in check, even in those dire circumstances, so that you can see how you can help the other people in your life. And again, when the team wins, everyone wins. So by doing that, you are going to help them, and you are also going to gain strength that you can use to get yourself out of the situation too.
Yeah, man, so good.
Now, of course, they couldn't find the hat, as you know. They couldn't find the hat.
Yeah.
And about 2 days later, somehow I forget. I'll have to check with my mom on this, but word had gotten out that I had asked for the hat, and so I think somebody else had brought her a hat, and then she delivered the hat to me.
Yeah.
When I got to America. It was a little pirate hat.
Yeah, I love that story. Great picture as well.
Yeah.
I want to double click on this concept of possibility thinking, because so often when somebody has something that's life altering in their life, again, the first things that go through their mind are, these are all the things that I can't do, that I won't be able to do. And it takes some time to work through that, but I think one of your strengths is being able to say, to get past that, what can I can't do, and then start to think, what can I do? And I remember hearing one story about, there's a little triangle hanging over your hospital bed, and you're like, well,
Yeah.
I can do pull-ups. And there were other wounded warriors at Walter Reed, and you saw people who are in similar circumstances, double above the knee amputees, and you saw them doing things. Can you describe just like that shift in mindset to possibility thinking, and how other people that you were surrounded with, that you saw going through similar circumstances, lifted you up with them?
Yeah, when you see, one of the things that can allow a person to open up possibilities for themselves is if they see another person that is kind of like them having done something similar. That's what it is. So, great example of this is climbing Mount Everest. Nobody thought it was possible. Then one guy did it, or two guys did it, and now it's you know what it is. It's a tourist attraction basically. But until that first person did it, nobody thought it was possible. So what happened was, people like that guy, or like those two guys that climbed it for the first time, they saw those two guys, and they said to themselves, well, they're not particularly different from me. Maybe since they can do it, I can do it. And so the way that played in for me was, I saw double above knee amputees in the clinic doing what I wanted to be able to do. And I was sitting there going, well, that guy's a Navy SEAL, and he's, similar amputations to me, double above knee amputee, and he's walking around on prosthetic legs. He's doing push-ups. He's doing this, doing that. That guy's a Marine, same thing. He's running over there on two prosthetic legs. That means I can do it too. So being able to see other people that have done similar things to you, what you want to do, it gives you, at least it helps open up at least the possibility that maybe you could do it if everything goes perfectly according to plan. So yeah, early on in my recovery, I talked to amputees that were like me, and they were telling me about all the stuff that they did. And then when I got to the main physical therapy clinic, I would see it all the time. And so that opened up possibilities for me.
Yeah. So how do you teach others to have that possibility thinking, especially when they're in a dark period of life? Like, what would you say to those folks?
Well, I think one of the things I tried to do when I was in the clinic was continue to do things. Do it yourself. Have the background. So when I learned how to run, it was about a year into my recovery, and by that point, all the other amputees that I was looking up to, they had retired. They were gone, but there was a new crop of amputees coming in, and I realized in that moment that I was those people that I had for these new people, and so now I had a responsibility to lead them and show them what was possible for them, so they would have something to strive towards. And so yeah, that's kind of part of the genesis of why I wanted to learn how to run effectively, part of the genesis of why I wanted to learn how to ride a bicycle. I wanted to do those things because I just wanted to be able to do that, but there was also that other component about showing other people what was possible for them. And so basically, if there's somebody that's struggling to see possibilities for themselves, you have to help them see the possibilities that exist. So you have to help them open their mind. And part of that is showing them yourself, like, hey, I'm a double above knee amputee, you're a double above knee amputee. I'm not particularly special. I can do it, so you can probably do it too. And then also helping them see their own capabilities, helping them see, because that's the other thing that gives people confidence or helps them see possibilities for themselves, is highlighting for them things that they have done that could suggest that they might be able to do this thing over here. So for me, you know, the month of marathons, I didn't know whether or not I could do that, but I had ridden my bike across the country, and that's a pretty tough challenge, and that's a pretty significant thing, and it requires a lot of effort and a lot of mental fortitude. So, you know, if I could do that, then I could probably do this. Or I didn't know if I could make it to the Paralympics 2012, but I had just spent the last year and a half in recovery, you know, working out basically 4 or 5 hours a day. And so if I just adjust what I was doing in there and applied it to rowing, maybe I could get strong enough to do it. So it's helping them see possibilities that they hadn't achieved through other people, and then also helping them see the capabilities that they have, and helping them see how those could potentially suggest that they could have the opportunity to be able to do this thing that they're trying to do. And that's what opens their mind. And so another component of this is, depending on how good of a relationship with them that you have, you could either tell them directly. Sometimes that can work if you're in a mentor, if you're kind of a mentor to that person and they trust you a lot and they believe in the things that you say. It's possible that you could say, hey man, look, I can do this, you can do it. You've done this, you could probably do this. They might believe that, but a lot of the times you have to be a lot more indirect. You have to help them highlight that for themselves. So we would use it. This is called the indirect approach. There's another leadership technique that we teach, using the indirect approach. Because if I come directly at you and I say, Kevin, you've done this, that means you can do it, you're going to have a natural psychological reactance to that, and go and kind of resist it, because I'm confronting you directly and I'm telling you, and you don't want to be told what to do as a human being, or you don't want to be told what you can do as a human being. So you're going to kind of resist that. But if I go indirectly and I just ask you some questions about that, kind of lead you to the realization that you could do this thing, then essentially what that's doing is you're highlighting these possibilities for yourself. So if you wanted to be able to run a marathon, I might go, well, how far have you run before? And you go, well, I've run a half marathon. That's all I've done. There's no way I can do the second half. That's cool. If you've run 13 miles, and how hard was that? Like, well, it was pretty hard. And how did you feel at the end? So I would ask you a bunch of questions that would help you highlight that, maybe it's possible I could run this marathon. But I have to do that in a way that you're telling it to yourself. That's the most effective way to do it. And so if I was going to coach somebody about getting through a difficult situation, that's what I would try and do.
I love that. That's so good. You know, as a clinician, the clinic that I had, our mission was to expand the boundaries of what was possible for each individual. And
Yeah.
it goes back to, you know, so many people, they've had that limitation, and whether it's physical or it's mental, and then they just get a little bit of traction. They experience like a small win, and it just opens up, oh, if I can do this, maybe I can do that. And it's amazing what humans are capable of when
Yeah, it's
when they have
progressive
that
overload.
mindset.
I mean, you saw that
Yeah,
with Michael Phelps when you were helping him.
yeah,
He did
totally.
this time for this distance.
Yeah,
Stands to reason I might be able to do a second faster.
yeah,
And then, speaking of psychological reactance, how often do you see a person, in a documentary or something, sustained an injury, and they tell the story about how their doctor told them, you're never going to walk. My
yeah.
doctor said I was never going to walk again, so I showed that doctor. So, that's how psychological reactance can work to your benefit, but it's a natural thing. When somebody tells you you can or you can't do something, you naturally want to do the opposite of whatever they just said.
Totally. And I mean, that's a great segue into you as a Paralympian. And you talked about leading. You talked about having a purpose. Your motto was survive, recover, live. how did that mindset influence you to say, hey, I'm going to figure out a new setting where I can direct my passion, and walk us through how you even discovered the Paralympics.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I don't exactly understand how I came up with Survive, Recover, Live because that was the first month of my recovery and I was high on Dilaudid all the time. So I don't. I think I just came back from surgery and I wrote it on the whiteboard or something in my room. I don't know how I don't remember the thought process that went into generating that, but it's very. If I can toot my own horn, it's very wise. It's a very wise, basically 3-step process to overcoming anything. So you survive it, you do what you have to do to get through it, and then you recover from it, you regain your strength, and then you orient yourself towards, going and pursuing all these new possibilities that are in your life, and then you go and you live your life and you go after these possibilities. That's basically what it is. And I think when I was in the hospital in that first month, I had a lot of time just to hang out. I would do physical therapy every day, but the sessions would be lift your stumps off the ground 20 times. That would be it. Or I'd do 5 pull-ups on my little triangle thing. And I remember I just liked working out. That's what I liked to do before my injury. And, at that point I realized I'm not going to die. I'm alive. My heart's going to keep beating. My lungs are going to keep breathing. My brain's going to keep thinking. So I need to figure out a way to do the things that I want to be able to do and still have a life that I enjoy. That's what I want to do. So let's start figuring out how I can still do those things. So I just started Googling whatever amputees working out or disabled people exercise or something like that, doing some research. And through that research, the Paralympics came up. So I looked at the Paralympics and I went, oh, that's cool. And then I saw that the sport of rowing was in the Paralympics. And I just remembered that rowing on the rowing machine was really hard. And I like doing hard workouts. And if maybe this is a way that I can still do a hard workout. And I always enjoyed the rowing workout. So I thought, oh, rowing would be a great way for me to continue to work out because it's a really hard workout and it's a good exercise. And maybe that's what I'll do. That's one thing that I know I can do. And so I put that aside for another time because I didn't really have the capabilities to row at that point, or I didn't have the facilities. I didn't have a rowing machine in my room or anything. So I just kind of put that aside. Then I also kind of went, also in that moment, I went, I've always been a little bit curious about what the life of an athlete, that I really enjoyed, or it really intrigued me, that level of dedication that requires to be an Olympic level athlete or a world-class level athlete, complete and total dedication to one thing, at the sacrifice of pretty much every other thing in your life. And that always kind of intrigued me a little bit. So I thought to myself in that moment, what, maybe when are the next Paralympics? Oh, 2012. 2010 now. Maybe. And I just kind of filed it away. And then as recovery went on, I gained strength, saw an opportunity to go learn how to row at this place in Washington, D.C. The coach just so happened to show up at the MATSE, or the physical therapy clinic was called the MATSE. He showed up with a rowing. He was a Navy veteran, so he showed up with a rowing machine one day. So I hopped on it and met him. We arranged for me to go down and learn how to row. So a lot of these things kind of fell into place. And then later on, he knew a female double above knee amputee named Oksana that wanted to go to the Paralympics. She flew out. She came out from Louisville. We met up. All these things happened that contributed to it. But yeah, I think I'm kind of going a little bit further in, past that question.
No, please do.
I've completely lost what the original question even was.
No, it was, again, like, how did you have that mindset of survive, recover, live? But
right, yeah.
I mean, what fascinates me about this, I spent my whole life in clinical work and working with Olympians and actually Paralympians at the Olympic Training Center, and just have this, awe of adaptive athletes who can retrain their body to move like that. When I think about it, you don't have hamstrings, you don't have quadriceps, you don't have calf muscles.
Well, I have them. They're just not connected.
But they're just not working the same way. You're rewiring your brain
Yeah.
activate your muscles differently so that you can perform that task. And it's just, I mean, it's unbelievable. I think about cycling and all the muscles that are involved in
Yeah.
that journey. But tell us, I mean, I can imagine it was frustrating at times to get your body to move the right way to row. And then walk us through what you accomplished in the Paralympics in 2012, because it's just phenomenal that you went from where you were in 2010 to where you ended up in 2012.
Yeah, the way that they had kind of mastered the process in the MATSE for teaching people how to walk as a double above the amputee at that point. So all the stuff that they would have me do, it's not like they just gave me two bionic knees and just said walk now, because that would have been extremely frustrating. So what they did was, it's another leadership technique we call iterative steps. They figure out it's kind of like progressive overload actually. So they figured out what's the smallest step that we can take from wheelchair to in the direction of being able to walk with two bionic knees. So the first one is they give you these things called shorties, which is just a prosthetic socket attached to a prosthetic foot, and you walk around with that. And it's super easy to do because all you have to do is just swing your leg around, and it kind of teaches you this new fundamental way that you have to walk now. And then they make that a little bit harder by making you taller, and then they make you a little taller, and then you also are, they started me in the parallel bars, walking like that. Once I got comfortable with that, I moved out to a walker on the track in this big harness system. And so once I learned with the walker, then two canes, then one cane, then no cane. So they took all these iterative steps to the eventuality of now I'm walking with two bionic knees with no assistive devices. And then from there, it's, learning how to use them to go up and down slopes, up and down stairs, applying it to various aspects of living in the real world, which is not this perfectly flat thing where everybody's there to kind of help you. And there's a lot of people out there that just don't care. And you fall down, they go, they just look at you and they keep walking. Which is actually what I prefer for them to do, because I like to just get up on my own. Anyway, so we took all these iterative steps, and then it was kind of, I have to say that learning the rowing technique wasn't frustrating from a disability perspective, because really all it was just rowing but without bending my knees. You can probably do that right now.
Yeah.
I just said, Kevin, sit on the rowing machine and row without bending your knees.
Yeah.
You'd pick it up super fast. What was frustrating and what was difficult to do was learning the rowing technique with the limbs that I did have, which is frustrating for an amputee. It's frustrating for an able-bodied person, because it's a very fine motor skill that you have to learn. That doesn't cater itself to, especially to me, because I just want to apply maximum force to everything. And unfortunately in rowing, you have to have you have to develop the finesse before you apply the force, and swimming as well. You can apply all the force you want, but if your oar is dug 3 feet into the water, you're just wasting energy. And so that was the difficult part of learning how to row, was learning the rowing technique. But it wasn't particularly, I wouldn't say it was difficult from a disability perspective.
But you mastered the finesse. You won a bronze medal.
I wouldn't say mastered. I got okay at it.
Hey, bronze medal at the Paralympics. I would say that's pretty darn
I got
good.
decent at it.
Yeah. And you also met your wife at the Olympics. So we need to just pause here for a second.
Yeah, so I trained for 9 months with my rowing partner, Oksana, who at this point has gone on to win, I don't even know, over 20 medals in various Paralympics, summer and winter. So she's awesome. But that was her first one and my first one together, and spent 9 months training together. Went to the 2012 games where nobody expected much from us at all, because we had only become a rowing team, 9 months before, and we had to get through U.S. trials, and then we had to go and earn a spot in the Paralympics in Serbia, and managed to win, trials, and then also win our race in Serbia. So we earned our spot, and people didn't, we were a couple of unknowns, kind of small, and nobody really expected much from us, but we were able to pull out that bronze medal over the home team, the Brits, by about 0.2 of a second in the final, little bit there. And then we were done in the first 3 days of the Paralympics, and the Paralympics was a couple weeks long, so we had tons of time to hang out and celebrate, go see other stuff. So the U.S. rowing team ended up going out to this bar outside the athletes' village, and just so happened to be the same bar that the British rowing team came into. And I saw this tall, gorgeous, blonde lady come into the bar that I recognized from seeing rowing, and I remember thinking to myself that she is very hot and I want to talk to her. And there was the opportunity, and it took a couple beers before I finally opened up, but we ended up talking and hanging out, became Facebook friends, and then spent some time together at the Paralympics. But then I went home and Pam stayed in England, but she had some time, so she came over to America for a good week and a half. Spent some time with her sister in New York, and then I met up with her, and we spent about a week together. And then she came back for I think about a month, or maybe a month and a half. And then we did long distance relationship for about 4 years
That's
before she
incredible.
finally moved over to America.
Yeah. And the rest is history. 2 kids.
Yeah, because she was
It-
still training for the Paralympics. She was still training for rowing because she won gold in London, and then she wanted to do another cycle. So she won world championships the year before London, won in London, won the next 3 world championships, and then won in Rio as well. So
Man, that's
she's the one
incredible.
you should be interviewing about
Yeah.
athletic prowess.
Yeah, let's put her on the list. That's incredible. Well,
She'd probably be good because now she's a farmer, so it'd be
I
very
love it.
applicable.
I love it. So part that so you go from the Paralympics, you're also in that process thinking about cycling, and you've
Yeah.
done some triathlon training, started doing some running. Uh, so in 2013, you decide, hey, I want to ride across the United States on my bike. There are a couple different ways that you can do it. Most people who say I rode across America, they start in St. Augustine, Florida, ride to San Diego. I mean, it's an incredible accomplishment, 3,020 miles
Hmm.
to go from coast to coast. You say I'm going to ride across America, but I'm going to do it in 5,180 miles, and I'm going to go from Maine down to Camp Pendleton, San
Yeah.
Diego. Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, I realized pretty quickly when I was training for rowing that it wasn't, I don't know, it didn't feel fulfilling. There was something missing from it, even though I was enjoying being an athlete. Uh, yeah, I don't know. That's just the whole time I just wanted to stop doing it, kind of. And I didn't really, I didn't know why, but I knew it. I just kind of instinctively knew it wasn't going to be. I guess there just wasn't a whole lot of purpose in it. I had this really powerful purpose being in the Marine Corps. I was killing terrorists and saving, helping the world become a better place. And with rowing, it's kind of felt like, yeah, you're inspiring people and you're representing your country and everything, but ultimately it's kind of just about you winning a medal or it's mostly about you. Or it was about me, primarily. And this just didn't really fulfill me. So I wanted to try something else, and I knew I had spent a bunch of time learning how to ride a bicycle. I was one of 2 double above knee amputees that I knew about that could ride a bicycle, a regular bicycle, no modifications to it whatsoever. And so I knew that I figured maybe if I did this really big challenge and raised some money for charity, then that would feel fulfilling, and that would be something that I would want to do. And the reason that I picked diagonally across is because I could be, because I'm kind of a jerk actually, because uh I was reading stories about, people. I see stories about somebody riding from Florida to Southern California, and then I looked at the map of the United States and I went, well, it's a lot fatter in the middle, isn't it? Or it's a lot fatter at the top. So I remember saying to myself, yeah, you rode across the country, but you probably could have rode across and made it a little bit longer if you really wanted to push yourself. I was being a jerk. That's what I was doing in my mind. I was being a hater, is what I was doing. And I kind of had that. I had that feeling just generally about a lot of stuff. We talked about climbing Mount Everest earlier. I hear about people climbing Mount Everest, and then the hater in me goes, did you though? Because the Sherpas did all this, the Sherpas did this, the Sherpas did this. What did you do? You just walked up the mountain. So for me, I didn't want anybody to be able to say that about me. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna do it the way that I would personally think is the best way that you can do it, and the only way to do it, which is to ride the longest possible way across, which would be diagonally, starting in Maine, ending in Southern California. There's no longer way that you can do it. And that, in my own mind, I was escaping my own inner hater by doing that and saying, well, I'm going to ride across the country, and there's not going to be any but associated with it because I'm doing it the longest possible way, and I'm going to do it in winter.
Well, for
That's
those of
it.
you, like, there's a awesome, like, 13-minute video called The Climb, Rob Jones' journey story. We'll put a link to that in our show notes, but it's a cool story. You've got your brother, you have a U-Haul van that you rented, you've got cots in the back. I mean,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit
I
more
purchased
about
that van.
yeah, tell us a
Purchased
little
that
bit more
van
about
for $3,000 and had about 250,000 miles on it.
that.
No idea whether or not it was going to make it across the country.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just put some camping gear in the back, a couple cots, and spent some nights in that. But luckily, my as you probably saw in the documentary, my friend Tina was able to get pretty good at calling ahead and finding hotels that would be willing to host us for the night for free. So she got really good at that. So we didn't spend that many nights in the back of the RV. So it was more of an equipment van. But yeah, and I mean, even looking back on it, if I'm being completely, if I could be even more strict and say you rode across the country, but you had a truck. You could have done it with panniers. You could have towed all your equipment. So even me, there's even the way I did that, there's still a but associated
Oh,
with it. And I
there
could also
always
go,
is.
but you didn't start in Eastport, Maine, which would have been another 100 miles. You started in Bar Harbor.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And that,
I can even go back and find some buts.
yeah, but I mean, there's always someone who's doing something harder. You know what I mean? So it's like, when do you feel accomplished
Yeah,
with what you do? I mean, when you have a David Goggins, it's like, there's always
yeah.
the but, you know what I mean? Like, you could always go harder, but I mean, yeah, it's an incredible accomplishment. As you think about that though, what was your greatest learning? Like, what is the one thing that as you reflect back on it, you're like, man, that shaped me into who I am today?
I guess a couple things would come to mind. First one was I remember. Uh, well, I would say there's three things. So the first thing would be uh, when I got to Colorado, it was February, and so I had to cross the Colorado Rockies. I had to cross the Continental Divide in February,
Yeah.
and it was about as you would expect. It was snowing, and I had to go over Monarch Pass, which is 11,000 feet
It's like Dumb and Dumber on
tallest.
that little scooter, right? Going over the
What's
pass.
that?
It's like Dumb and Dumber, the movie,
I
like
know.
go on the
Yeah, they had to go
scooter.
over
Yeah.
that mountain. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Uh, and basically, the road was closed
Yeah.
for every day leading up to it, and I was so tired, and I've gone from basically sea level to 8,000 feet in 3 days, so I was feeling the effects. I was really tired, and the road was just consistently closed the 3 4 days, and I would do all these. I would do all these as I went. I would do these receptions where people from American Legions and other organizations would come out and host me for the night, and I would talk to them. And I remember that one. There had been something arranged, and it was the night before I was supposed to go up Monarch Pass, and was still closed. And I was feeling frustrated, and I just said, "I'm not coming." And I just said, "No, I'm not coming." And everybody was really annoyed at me, rightfully so. But I was not feeling good, and frankly, I was tired of hearing people tell me that it wasn't going to be possible to go over the mountain because that's what everybody was saying. Everybody was saying, except for Steve, everybody was saying maybe you should drive over. Maybe you should, and you can imagine how I might react to that. Maybe you should drive over the mountain. Maybe you should. You're gonna have to. You can't go over the mountain. You're gonna have to go a different way. You're gonna have to wait till spring. It's just not possible. And so, frankly, I didn't want to go to this reception and hear a bunch of that. So I just said I'm not coming. And then the next day, I checked the traffic camera at the top. I checked the status of the road. It said it was open. So I got on the bike and Steve got on the truck and we rode up. It took me about 6 hours
Man.
to go 6 miles total. But we made it to the top, rode down the other side, and I was past it. I was past that part. And so the first thing would be, nobody knows what you're capable of but you. They can have their theory. They can have they could be a doctor. They could be Dr. Kevin telling you you're not going to walk again because of this and that reason, but they don't know. And so the only way to really find out what you're going to be able to do is to go out and find out for yourself, to proof the lane in its essence. Listen to what other people are telling you, so you know that, because when somebody tells you can't do things, you don't close your mind to that. What you do is you take what they say, evaluate it, inform your mindset with it. This is good information they're telling me. They're telling me about the threats. They're telling me that might be an avalanche up there. Maybe be aware about it. There's a bunch of snow. So all these things they're saying are legitimate things, but in the end, you have to take all that information. You have to decide what you want to do. You can't let somebody else make that decision for you. So stay open-minded, but at the same time, you have to be the one that makes the decision about whether or not you want to try and do the thing, because nobody else can tell you, because it's not their life and it's not their mission. And then the other part of it was, so I got past that, and then we had to go all the way to California still. And I remember going through Nevada, there would be these 20-mile long climbs. They weren't super steep, but they would be 20 miles long, to steady going up to the top of these mountains. And I remember the wind would be blowing. I'd be that plus in a headwind. And I remember being extremely frustrated by that. And just how, in retrospect, I find it to be funny about how I purposefully did this in the hardest way I could possibly do. But then when it got really, really hard, I was complaining about it, and I was angry that it was so hard. And just kind of that little bit of, I guess, dichotomy, that little bit of hypocrisy about, I purposefully made it really hard, and then I got mad when it got really hard. That's fun. That was funny to me. And I just had to remember that this is what you chose to do, and so you can't get upset and annoyed that the thing that you chose to do is now coming to fruition. You have to remember that this is what's going to happen. If you're going to be dumb, you got to be tough, type of thing.
Yeah.
And then the third thing that will transition us into the month of marathons kind of nicely was, even at the end of the bike ride, I didn't really feel fulfilled. And yes, I raised money for charities. Yes, I was really, really proud of this big thing. For all I know, I'm pretty sure first ever double above knee amputee to ride a bicycle across America. I don't think anybody's had done it up to that point. An actual bicycle, not a hand cycle, a regular bicycle. And I don't think anybody's done it since that I'm aware of. So even though all those things were true, I was very proud of that stuff. I still didn't feel fulfilled, and part of it was. And it took me a while to figure out why. I didn't understand what was happening, because a huge accomplishment, and not only physically, but also with raising money for charities. And I kind of didn't really know what to do. And so that's when I started training for triathlon. I figured just do what you're good at. And I figured, maybe I try and make the Paralympics again, except in triathlon. But then I'll pause there to give you an opportunity. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to. I'll lead into the next lesson that came to fruition from that. But
Yeah,
I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to discuss before we get.
You did such a great job of, because I was gonna dive in a little bit more to what were those learnings, because when we're going through those hard times, it's like, what are the learnings, and what gets you through those low points? And you did just a great job.
Yeah, pretty awesome, I guess.
Reflecting on that. But I think one area that I think you could expand more is, and I saw this when I was working with Olympians, like they achieve what they've spent their entire life training for. You get to that gold medal, and you're maybe at retirement, and you're like, what now? And it's like this identity crisis, because your whole life has been identified as, an Olympian, a swimmer, whatever it is that you do. How and maybe was that part of what you're experiencing at the end of that accomplishment of, like, what is my identity? Like, I'd love to hear some more thoughts on that.
I fell into that trap for sure. And that's a trap that veterans fall in. That's a trap that anybody can fall into. Veterans especially, and especially other people that have spent all this time building themselves into something, and then all of a sudden something happens that they lose that thing. Like the market takes a turn, or COVID hits, and their restaurant that they spent all these years building, and that's how they identified themselves. Now that thing it's gone out of business because the entire country shut down, and they had to go out of business. So people fall into that trap all the time, and really what it is, the way that you defeat that is you think long term, you think strategically about your entire life. Because look, most people you're not an athlete from 18 to 70. Everybody knows that there's a small window that you're going to be an athlete, and there's a small window that you're going to be at your prime. Michael Phelps knew that. He knew it going into it, that I'm not going to be winning gold medals until I'm 50, because it's just age is a thing. So everybody knows that there is going to be some sort of transition point coming for them at some point in their life. Veterans know it too. And even if you're going to do 20 years, so at some point you're going to get out and you're going to have to move on to the next thing. So you have to think strategically about your life as a whole. And this thing that you're doing now, even if it is 20, 30 years long, this is only one part of that entire life. And so you have to have a vision for what you want your life to be. And ultimately, I think what most people want their lives to be is just something that's meaningful and something that's enjoyable. If you think strategically like that, if you have your objective as that, then you can literally figure out almost infinite different things that you can do to achieve that. But you have to start thinking about those things prior to this current thing that you're doing ending. You know the ending is coming up. So don't let yourself be surprised by the fact that it ends, because you know it's going to end. You don't know exactly when it's going to end. Maybe it's going to end at the end of the next Olympic cycle. Maybe you'll go another cycle. Maybe you won't even make it the next 6 months because you have an accident and you get hurt. So you always have to be thinking about strategically where we're going. You have to be kind of focused on this objective that you're doing right now, but also focus on how that plays into the strategy. So you have to have both of those things in focus at the same time, and be thinking about what's happening, that path after you're done with this athletic career, after you're done with this thing that you're doing now. Think about that. And that doesn't mean that you you still have to stay focused on being an athlete. You're not going to be working a job at the same time as you're training for the Olympics if you can afford it. A lot of people do have to do that, but you're still spending the vast majority of your time and effort working on that thing. But you're also kind of thinking, well, and maybe in 4 years I need to be able to do something else. So maybe I could take some courses, maybe I could do some training, maybe I could do this, maybe I can do that, so that you're trying different things to figure out what you might want to do later on. And yeah, I didn't do a very good job of that. While I was rowing, while I was doing the bike ride, and not even during the month of marathons, I really didn't think about it. So it's kind of another one of those natural things that people tend to do. People tend to focus on the things that are right in front of their faces, and they don't think strategically about their life or anything about what they're doing. But that's a counterintuitive thing that we have to train ourselves to do, is think strategically, think long term, and how the stuff that we're doing now is going to affect that.
Maybe part of that too is like each one of us having a unique identity and purpose, and instead of having our vocation or whatever sport we are, athletic endeavor, defining who we are, it's we're bringing that unique identity to whatever we're doing. Because if you're grounded in that, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You're just the same person. You're who you are, and you're bringing those different components to whatever you encounter. And I mean, I see that with you now in leadership. You're bringing your unique self to these different venues that you're a part of.
Yeah, you have to think intangibly about what you are at a higher level. I am a person that does this. I'm a person that puts other people first. I'm a person that likes to push themselves. I'm a person that does this and that. That's what I am. This is one thing that I'm doing that satisfies all those things. But then when that's not your identity, that's your, that's your current vocation, that's your current identity or whatever, but you have this higher level identity that you can anchor yourself to, that a lot of different specific things can fulfill.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. Exactly what you said.
I love that. I want to make sure we don't miss the monthly marathons. And this is you kind of already described your mindset with how you choose your hard, but you could have done the month of February, 28 days and 28 consecutive marathons. You chose October, not the greatest month to be running marathons, 31 days, but tell us about 31 marathons in 31 days in 31 different cities. Maybe just walk us through the beginning and the end and what that experience was like.
Yeah, well, to close out, what we were in the transition is the final lesson from the bike ride, and then we'll transition into that. So, one of the things I did, I followed that same mindset of trying to pick the hardest thing, and it did not work out for triathlon because I decided that there's a category in triathlon that's kind of designed for double above knee amputees to be in, where you use a hand cycle for the run and or a hand cycle for the bike and a racing wheelchair for the run. But I just rode my bike across the country. I didn't use a hand cycle, and I ran using prosthetics, so I didn't want to do that. And so I moved up a category into a category that used a bike and I could run. Problem was, I was running against people that had one fully intact leg. I was running against I was going against single above knee amputees, and they just absolutely destroyed me on the bike. There's no way. I mean, yeah, and I thought maybe I could outwork them and train hard, and maybe I could have if I had more time, but I just didn't have that much time. I had less than a year and a half to do it, and so they just absolutely. I beat them in the run, but they absolutely crushed me on the bike, and it's just I couldn't overcome it. But because I did that, I ended up rediscovering a passion that I had for running. My 5K was 18 minutes, which was pretty fast. And I ran the Marine Corps Marathon for fun during that time period, and I had that experience. And so then when I finally called it quits on triathlon, I realized that it just wasn't going to happen, and to continue would just be wasting my time, where I could be putting that effort into something else. I realized a couple things. I finally realized why the bike ride wasn't fulfilling. It was because it was about me. It was still about me. It was about me pushing myself. It was about me trying to achieve, or it was about me seeing what I was capable of. That was what I was trying to achieve. And then the raising money was kind of a submission of that. And then also I didn't the whole time people were asking me, they would ask me to speak to their groups and ask to do all these things. I never wanted to do it. I was of a mindset. I just want to do what I'm doing, and you guys can do what you're going to do. Just look at what I'm doing, and then you can get your own lessons from it. I don't want to tell anybody what they should be doing. So ultimately what I didn't want to do was I didn't want to lead anybody. I wasn't accepting the leadership role that I should be. I was denying that, and I'd been doing that in rowing as well. And that was the thing. That was the thing that made the bike ride unsatisfying, because I was refusing that natural intrinsic need that I think most human beings have, and I certainly have, is to lead. So I realized that I needed to lead. And I had that realization at the same time. I kind of was noticing during that time period that, I talked about this in the keynote, the perception around veterans had been shifting since the beginning of the war. In the beginning of the war, we were seen as these noble heroes, strong and unassailable strength, these beacons of strength. But by the time 2016 rolled around, that mindset had shifted slightly to now all the veterans are broken. They're these broken heroes. They're not strong heroes. They're not noble heroes. They're broken heroes. Or they are noble heroes, but they're also all broken. And exemplified by the fact that every single veteran character I saw in any movie that I saw, any TV show, any news story, any song that was about veterans, it was all about how broken they were and how they were constantly haunted by what they had seen and on the cusp of implosion, and they were all just pathetic now. And I didn't like that. It didn't sit well with me because that wasn't me. It wasn't my friends, and it wasn't anybody that I knew. It wasn't. Research showed that it wasn't even the vast majority of veterans. So it was like a small percentage of veterans were that way, and that's important for everybody to know. And it's a thing that does happen. But the vast majority of veterans were being lumped into that, even though that's not representative of them. And because of that, everybody else's perception of veterans was that they're broken. That's going to have negative effects on veterans, even though it comes from a good place. It comes from a good place, a sympathetic place. I just didn't want us to be seen as victims because we weren't. And, it's not going to help anybody. It doesn't help anybody in life. It doesn't help veterans especially. So those two things combined made me realize I needed to lead on this issue. I needed to take ownership of that issue. I needed to lead in this issue. And so those two things combined with the fact that I had run I had run a marathon recently, and I had followed along with the Iron Cowboy who did his 50 Ironmans in 50 states in 50 days, led me to say to myself, I need to run a bunch of marathons back to back. That'll create a story. News stories will not be able to help themselves but cover this ridiculous thing that most people are going to say is impossible. So that's what I need to do. I need to create my own story by doing this completely impossible thing. And I sat down and I said, well, how many marathons should I run? Maybe I should run 20. But then I thought that's not long enough. By the time I get going, by the time I get momentum, we'll be done. So that's not enough. And I thought, oh, what if I do 50? And then I thought to myself, people aren't going to pay attention for that long. Because I was following the Iron Cowboy. And by the time he got to 40, I was saying to myself, oh, is he still doing that? I didn't even pay attention. So I figured everybody could pay attention for a month. The longest month is 31 days. So that's what I decided to do. And then I called it the month of marathons. Yeah. And I figured in order to get maximum news coverage, I should do it in big cities, in 31 of the biggest cities that we have in the country.
Tell us about that final marathon when you came in and just that experience and what that felt like. Because, with the bike ride, you got to the end of it and it didn't quite feel fulfilling, but walk us through what the marathon felt like with that renewed purpose.
Yeah, I mean, it was extremely poignant. And even though the month of marathons was an incredibly difficult month and there was a lot of pain and a lot of psychological challenges that were associated with it, I enjoyed it in a way that I didn't enjoy the bike ride. And it's because I was fulfilling that purpose, that need to lead that I had identified. I was fulfilling the role that I had been denying for all that time. Typical hero's journey type stuff where you deny the call to action and it's just, you're not going to be fulfilled unless you finally accept that call to action. And then you go on this huge journey that is fulfilling to you. But it was especially poignant because my mom came along as my massage therapist. So we were in the back of an RV. We just drove an RV to all the cities. And when I was in the back of the RV, I would run. We'd get in the RV, I would eat, and then she would give me 2 massages while we drove to the next while we drove the next city. And then we'd go to sleep. And then also, so she was there. So she was there to see this huge accomplishment the entire time. So that was really cool. And then Pam was there. She was running the whole operation. She was in charge. All I did was run and then talk. That's all I did. She was in charge of everything else. So she was there. So the 2 most important people in my life were there for the entire thing, helping me. And, I wouldn't have been able to do it without their help. So they were there to see, so there was that thing where they had helped me so much and dedicated so much of their lives to helping me do this thing. It was really cool to be able to fulfill the promise that I had made and making their time worthwhile. But then also there people from throughout my life were there. My grandma came, my dad, friends from growing up. My prosthetist, ran with me when I was in Denver. My physical therapists were there. That's got to see me take my first running steps. My nurse that took care of me in Bethesda Naval Hospital was there. So all these people from throughout that life were there. Marines that I had served with were there. And so all of them got to see me essentially come to this, this moment of fulfillment in life all at the same time. And it was also on Veterans Day. It was also on the Veterans Memorial. So it was a really this kind of perfect storm of fulfillment and coolness, for lack of a better term. And it was a really, really cold day, and it was a really, really hard marathon. And I had a back injury, and my stumps were absolutely killing me with blisters. And so, and even despite all of that, I wasn't complaining about how hard it was. I was happy about it.
Wow.
And it was all just because I had that purpose to lead.
Yeah. Man, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing sharing that journey with you or with us. Before we move to chapter 3, which is going to focus on what you're doing now, the leadership, I want to read a journal entry that you posted in July 17th, 2020, titled "I Can't." It's kind of long, but I'm going to read through this because I just think it's so good for our listeners to hear that. I can't. This is an expression that is vilified in our minds beginning at a young age. Every time a young child announces this decision, they are corrected. The first adult that hears it asks them whether or not they have tried. Generally, this confrontation will result in the child giving their task another attempt until their attention span moves on to something else. The adult will see this and chuckle to themselves with the knowledge that this is just a child who has yet to learn the art of virtue and of perseverance. By the time this child comes of age, however, they will have been told by adults more times than they can count that there is no such thing as can't. It is interesting then to think about how many adults seem to proclaim this expression in their lives. It is because, like many things that adults tell their children, they're simply telling the child a general rule that children must follow but can be broken once one is grown. Or is it because these adults are simply repeating what they were told as children without thoroughly examining the phrase "I can't" truly suggests? If you confronted an adult that claims they can't do something with the same question about whether or not they have tried, the answer will almost always be yes. Adults have learned enough to know that it is unreasonable to say they can't until they have at least tried once. Therefore, the real question that we should be asking in response is, have you tried everything? Have you exhausted every possible option, scenario, combination, tool, and approach? I do not simply refer to the ones that you knew of at the time you decided to undertake your task. I mean, have you also researched possibilities that you hadn't known about? Have you determined whether or not there is another person out there that has performed the exact same task you're attempting, or at least something similar? Have you exhausted this research? Have you read every book, blog, journal, magazine, bathroom stall, and website? If the answer to any one of these questions is no, then go back and try again, because you don't truly know if you can do something until you've tried absolutely everything. The fact of the matter is that rarely, if ever, is the answer to all these questions yes. Therefore, what is people actually mean when they say I can't? What is it that people actually mean when they say I can't? A more accurate, more verbose way of saying would be, I don't care about or want enough this task or the resultant benefits of it in order to do all that is necessary to achieve it. I was told countless number of times by people during my month of marathons that they couldn't run a marathon, let alone 31 straight. Now, every now and then, when I had time, I would discuss what they said. We would jointly conclude that if something they cared about depended on them doing so, it would be possible. The most common example I used is, if someone had a gun to your child's head, do you think you could do it then? Therefore, the phrase "I can't" denotes a lack of investment as opposed to a lack of potential or ability. I do not mean to say that every person I had this conversation with should have had the motivation to run marathons. It was something I had decided to do, not them. I merely wanted to express to them what I'm expressing here. Given the right purpose and enough time, you can. What happens if someone said they can't? We ask them if they've done everything. In rare cases happens and they honestly say yes. Do we concede that they can't? Nope. If everything in existence has been attempted enough to determine that it won't work, then congratulations. You've been awarded the honor of being the person who must invent the method or the tool or determine the right combination. Whether or not you will once again boils down to how much you care and time. It may end up being a person ends up trying for their entire life, but I suggest removing the phrase I can't from your lexicon and replacing it with I can't yet. Do this so that you don't risk being on your deathbed saying, I didn't. Rob,
Bad.
that's such a profound journal entry. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your thought process when you were writing that.
Yeah, the genesis of it was that little thing I did in there where so many times on the month of marathons, I would have somebody come up to me and say, I can't believe you're running all these marathons. I can't run one marathon. And I don't know, but people said that to me. It just never resonated with me because I kind of knew that that person probably could. I just kind of knew that running a marathon isn't that hard. I've seen a lot. There's hundreds of thousands of people that run marathons every year. Their first marathon. There's hundreds of thousands of people that do it. So it's not. Is it tough? Yeah, but it's not that tough. It's not so tough that people can't do it. That it's like this. It's not like running a 4-minute mile. It's not like climbing Mount Everest back in the day. It's not that kind of accomplishment. So I kind of knew that person could probably do it if they really wanted to, and so that didn't resonate with me. And I would just, as I just couldn't let go of that thought that why is that person saying that? And so I had to sit down and kind of figure out why do people say that? What are they really saying when they say that phrase? And I couldn't get it out of my mind until I figured it out and wrote it down. It was like a little puzzle for me about what's going on in this person's mind. And that's, that essay is kind of what came from that. And really what it is just, you don't have, when you say I can't, what you're really saying is, if I could change that definition a little bit, I would say I don't care enough to want to. That's really what it is. So it's not about whether or not you're physically capable. It's not about capabilities. It's just about whether or not you have a purpose that's strong enough to get you to want to do it. And if you want to do something, you're going to figure out a way to do it. You just have to have that purpose behind it. And so when I was feeling extra ornery about somebody telling me that on the month of marathons, I would ask them that question I wrote about in the essay about, so you say you can't run a marathon, but if if somebody had a gun to your kid's head, I bet you could probably run a marathon. And they would go, yeah, probably. And so that doesn't necessarily prove my point, but it sort of proves the mentality of that.
Love that. Now you're dad, you've got a 1.5-year-old and a 5-year-old. How are you raising them to think I can't yet?
I think the primary way, the 5-year-olds and I'll be 1.5-year-olds and 5-year-olds are very hard to coach directly with words. You just have to use your own actions. So the way I'm doing that primarily is just by doing things and doing hard things and not letting them see me, trying not to say that I can't do things. I'm just trying to exemplify the things that I want them to know myself and being a model right now. And then as they get older, I can kind of explain things to them verbally. But right now, even anything I tell my son I think would be useful to him. He doesn't want to hear it. So, you have to be very careful with that and just be patient and just do hard things myself. Like me not having legs very rarely affects anything that me and him want to do. Sometimes it can, because there are certain things that just I'm not really going to be all that capable of doing. But it never stops us from hiking, never stops us from going swimming, never stops us from working out in the gym together. So I'm just going to keep doing all the things that I need to be able to do, despite the fact that I have 2 prosthetic legs. And he'll see that. And then eventually, as he gets older and I can explain things to him about psychology and mindsets and that kind of thing a little bit better. And then also just encouraging him when he says he can't do something, trying to help him see that he should keep trying again. But that's hard as well, because what motivates a 5-year-old is it's hard to figure out sometimes.
Yeah. What a great training ground though to have kids and be able to
Yeah,
model
just
some of
not,
these leadership principles even to kids
yeah, just not
as
letting
they're
my
young.
own fear of him getting hurt
Yeah.
get me to like, if he says, "Do you think I can jump from the top of my bunk bed down to the ground?" I have to go, "Yeah, probably. I think you could probably do it if you want to. What do you think?" And sometimes he does it, sometimes he doesn't. But it's trying to prevent my own fears about him getting hurt. Uh, don't let that stop. Don't let that make me tell him he can't do something.
Thank you for walking us through that journey with, man, biking, Paralympics, such an incredible career. Now you're focused on leadership development. You work
Uh,
with Echelon Front, um, the authors of the book Extreme Ownership, Leif Babin and Jocko Willink, leaders of the Echelon Front. Love to hear a little bit more just about the organization and what you do now, from a leadership perspective.
yeah. So what we do is we teach leadership, and a lot of times people they have a little bit of a misunderstanding about what leadership is. We have a different definition of what a leader is, and then what leadership is. And the way that we define a leader is any human being who interacts with other human beings. And because what we recognize is that leadership is about influencing other people to work in relation to a common goal. That's what you're doing with leadership. And most people, they have their definition of leadership comes from bad leaders they've had in the past or movies or TV shows, which they're never accurate. It's just they kind of think that what a leader does is boss people around, tell everybody what to do. But that's not what leadership is. What leadership is influencing them to work together towards that goal and providing them with that reason that they want to do. That's what they want to do. And so that's what leaders do. And so that's what we teach people how to do. And there's skills that are associated with it. There's ways that you can do that called the laws of combat: cover, move, symbol, prioritize and execute, and decentralized command. And what we do is we teach people not only that general philosophy about what leadership actually means and what effective leadership is, but also how to actually do it by using these laws of combat, these skills of leadership. And that happens through keynotes like you saw, that happens through workshops, experiential events like our FTX program, and all these different things that we do.
And I love that definition of a leader as anyone who interacts with other people, anyone who
Yeah.
influences other. We're all
Human beings
leaders.
who interact with other human beings. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Basically,
a
every single person is a
yeah,
leader.
yeah. And I mean, you probably see this. I hear people say all the time, "I'm not a leader." Like, what do you say to people who have that mindset?
I guess it would kind of depend on the circumstances under which I hear that. If it's a workshop, if I'm doing a keynote and it's a client, and they say that maybe after the keynote, I think they're probably saying it because that's what they usually say. So I would remind them of what I just taught them. But if somebody came up to me on the street and said that they're not a leader, I might ask them some of those earnest questions I was talking about earlier. But really what it is just about helping them see that that's not the mindset that's going to be beneficial to them. If you don't think that you have the capability to lead in your life, then you're not going to be able to solve problems and you're not going to be able to accomplish the mission. You're not going to be able to help the team orient itself towards accomplishing the mission if you don't see yourself as leader. And the best way for you to live your life is to see yourself as a leader, because that's what gives you the control. That's what gives you the ability, the possibility, like we talked about earlier, of helping everybody on the team accomplish the mission and helping you achieve your own mission in life. If you see yourself as a leader. And if you don't, then you're just giving up all control. You're giving up all possibility of making that happen. And you're just waiting for, I guess, somebody else to solve all your problems, which is never going to happen.
Yeah, and what do you say to those people when they're in a tailboard, they're getting ready to, do a job, and the person who's leading that tailboard, maybe is not thinking through all the hazards that might be on that job site, and you're sitting there and you're like, well, I'm not leading this tailboard, but I recognize that there are things that we need to be aware of to perform this job safely. Like, what would you say to that person, to step up, to speak up, to see themselves as a leader?
So what I say to the person that sees that there's an issue over here,
Yeah,
that they're not in
exactly.
charge of, but they see that
They're
as an
not in
issue.
charge, but
Yeah.
they know that there are hazards out there, and they may feel like, man, I can't speak up in this situation because I'm not the leader. How do they change that mindset and say, actually, I am a leader here, and I do have, the capability to inform others to speak up?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say to them is kind of what I was saying earlier, and that is that yeah, you have to have the mindset that you are a leader, and it is your responsibility to make sure that the team is successful, regardless of what your position is. So if you see somebody in a team, uh, essentially going in a direction that you think is going to cause catastrophe, is going to cause failure for them or for the team, then you do have a responsibility to help prevent that from happening and help make sure that the team is successful. And that is your responsibility, even if you're not in that specific chain of command, you don't have a title or a position that's above that person, you have a responsibility to help make sure that the team is going to be successful. And look, that's what leadership is. That's and then depending on how much time I had, we would go through the laws of combat, we would go through the skills of leadership about how you actually do that. But that is what leadership is about influencing other people, regardless of your position, your status, your level in the company or on the team, influencing other people to make sure that everybody on the entire team is successful. And it doesn't matter what position you hold, you can do that from any position that you're in. And having that mindset is what gives you the ability to do that. So if you don't see yourself as a leader, you're not going to. That's the first thing that you have to recognize. But then once you recognize that, you have to empower yourself with the skills of leadership. And the skills of leadership are a lot like the skills of any job that you're going to do on power lines or in a factory or in any of these vocations that require a skill set. It's the same exact thing. It's just that the tools that you're using are the laws of combat, and the things, quote unquote, things that you're working with are human beings. And unfortunately, human beings are a lot more complex than a wrench or a set of power lines or a bucket truck or things like that. But those are the lack of a better term, the things or the objects that you're working on. That's the terrain that you're working in, and the tools to lead those people are the laws of combat.
I hope people have the opportunity to hear you give that keynote address talking about the laws of combat. I mean, it's
Yeah,
so
me
good.
or any of the other,
Yeah.
I think 17 instructors that we have
Yeah.
would be fantastic to hear give that keynote.
Can you just really, really high level give us a taste of what the laws of combat are? You'd mentioned cover, move, simple, prioritize and execute, and decentralized command. Maybe just walk people through so they have a little context of what the laws of combat actually mean.
Yeah, sure. I'll do it really quickly. So the cover move is teamwork. It's about working together as a team. It's about everybody on the team supporting each other. And what we mean by team is the whole team. Because like we talked about earlier, our natural tendency is to look out for ourselves or for a small team to look out for themselves and not see other teams at the same company or other teams that are on the same bigger team as their team. They look out for themselves first. So what it's about is about putting the entire team before your team. It's about putting the entire team before yourself. That's how effective teamwork happens. In order for that to happen, we have to have good relationships with other teams. We have to have good relationships with other people on our team. Because if the whole team wins, everybody wins. That's what cover move is about: supporting each other, supporting the entire team, and putting the team before yourself. And then simple is essentially about making sure that everybody on that team understands what the mission is. Because even if you have a great team, if we don't understand what the mission is, we can't do it. We can't execute the mission if we don't understand what it is. So in order for people to understand what they're supposed to be doing, in order for them to understand the mission, we have to simplify it. Because how many different people are going to be working on that mission? We might have dozens or hundreds or maybe even thousands of people working on the same mission. So if we make that mission complex, the more likelihood is that they're not going to understand it. So we have to keep it as simple as we possibly can, which means we need to communicate with everybody in a simplified way. The plan needs to be simple, and we have to make sure that everybody on the team understands. And that's the responsibility of the person that's sharing the information, the person that is sharing the mission, but it's also my responsibility, the very frontline person, to make sure that I understand and make sure everybody else on my team understands. So that's what simple is about. It's about simplifying things so that everybody on the team can understand what we're doing. And then prioritize and execute. You got your team, Everybody understands what they're supposed to be doing. Guess what's going to happen along the way? Problems. Problems are going to come up. Things are going to change. Issues are going to arise. And it is our natural tendency when we have a bunch of problems happening all at the same time to want to focus on all those different problems simultaneously. But what ends up happening is you work on this thing a little bit, you put a little bit of resources here, a little bit here, a little bit here, and none of those problems actually get solved. And now the team is suffering because we're focusing on too many things all at the same time. And so what we have to do is figure out what is the top priority, what is the most effective priority for the team to be working on, and focus on that. Focus on that. So we have to come up with our priorities. We focus on the top priority. Once that priority is done, we reestablish, we figure out what's the next top priority, focus on that, and that, and that, and that, and then we go down like that, and then all the problems get solved, and we continue on with the mission. Like I said, when we are faced with a bunch of things, there's a natural tendency to want to work on all those things at the same time, and a lot of the times we will misprioritize. We will misprioritize things because human beings are emotional creatures. And a lot of the times when a priority pops up, we think that it is the most important priority because that priority is making us feel the most powerful emotions. So what we have to do is detach from those emotions, take them, put them down here just for a second, so that you can evaluate what the actual top priority is logically. So that's prioritize and execute. And then decentralized command means everyone leads. Everybody on the team is a leader. What we need is for everybody on the team to lead. That is how teams are most effective. That's how you can accomplish anything, is if you allow everybody on your team to be a leader. You empower them with the opportunity to make decisions. You empower them with responsibility to make decisions. And the way that we make that happen is by training people, making sure they all know what they're supposed to be doing. They are trained, and then also making sure that they understand why they're doing what they're doing. What is the objective that we're trying to achieve? Because if a problem arises and we don't know why we're doing what we're doing, if we don't know how what we're doing is affecting the overall mission or what the actual mission is, then we're not going to be able to solve that problem because we don't know where we're going. We don't know what the ultimate objective of the mission is. But if I understand why I need to do this thing and how that affects the ultimate mission, if this thing isn't working out, then I can adjust. I can solve that problem on my own without having to ask, because I understand how it all plays in, how that thread continues all the way down to what I'm doing. So the centralized command is about empowering everybody on your team to lead, and the way that you empower them is by training them and making sure they understand why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, I love that. And that goes back to that question that I had of how does someone feel empowered to speak up when they see a situation where, maybe it's high risk. It's that decentralized command where it's the mindset that everyone on the team is a leader. Everyone on the team can step up. So you nailed it. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I love the book Extreme Ownership. I would highly recommend. I don't know, for some reason the audiobook, I love listening to Jocko and Leif tell those stories, and it really comes to life. Can you explain?
Yeah, they're good narrators.
Yeah, can you explain just the concept of extreme ownership, because it's so counterintuitive to how we live life? I mean, I feel like our culture is so, it's a lot of just victim narratives, and I'd love you to explain the concept of extreme ownership and what that actually looks like.
It is a mindset that we have to develop that is absolutely contrary to what we want to do. But extreme ownership is taking complete, full, absolute, total, 100% responsibility for everything that affects the mission in any way, which means we're all the problems, finding the solution to those problems, and taking the actions that are going to solve the problems and make the mission successful. It means we're not going to blame anybody else for anything that happens. We're going to blame ourselves, and we're not going to make any excuses, and we're not going to wait around for anybody else. We're going to lead, and we're going to solve problems. We're going to make things happen. That's what it is. And the reason that that's effective is because when there's a problem, if I blame you, or if I blame that person, and then what's going to happen? That person's going to blame, everybody's blaming each other for the problem. What happens to the problem? Nothing, because nobody's actually trying to solve the problem. But if the problem arises and I take ownership of that problem, I say, hey, this is my fault, and this is what I'm going to do to solve it, Now, a lot of the times, other people are going to do that too. They're going to say, "Wait, no, it was my fault. I'm going to solve. I'm going to do something." A lot of the times, it's going to happen. But even if nobody else does it, I am solving the problem, so the problem is going to get solved. So the only way that a problem gets solved or a mission gets accomplished is if somebody is actively working to make that happen. And the only way that they will do that is if they truly believe that they have ownership over that problem, if they have ownership over accomplishing the mission.
Yeah, and it just that mindset is so transformative. It is the toughest thing to do as a leader. You know what I mean? Because the inclination is
It's
like,
foundational too. I mean, you
yeah,
have to do that, kind of have to do that first
totally,
before you do
because
anything else.
it's so easy to want to point the finger, and yeah, it is a huge discipline to
Yeah.
think in that context, and it carries over into every aspect of life. I mean,
And it's a burden. It's a burden of
yeah,
responsibility. It's tough. It's tough to have to be the person to solve all the problems. All the problems in your life, you have to solve them all. That's tough, and it's brutal to have to recognize that everything in my life is my fault. That is absolutely true. That is brutal. But it's the only thing that it gives you the power. It's the only thing that empowers you to solve problems in your life and make your life what you want it to be. Is
yeah,
if you take ownership of your problems, you can take ownership of your life.
yeah. It changes your marriage. It changes how you raise your kids. It changes how you show up to work with your
Changes
coworkers.
everything, man.
Changes
Changes the
everything.
way that you changes the way that you think about things in your own mind.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's a constant discipline. Like I feel like you never say I've achieved this because it's a constant
Yeah.
pursuit.
No, but there's no such thing as 100%,
Yeah.
you know, 100%, maximum capacity in anything. Even Michael Phelps didn't reach his 100%. He got pretty close, in terms of swimming. Uh, but yeah, there's always something else that you can do to get better.
Rob, this has been such a incredible conversation. I'm so grateful for your time. I'm so grateful for the life that you have lived, the choices that you've made that inspire all of us to become better. I'm grateful that you share leadership principles with other people, that you've put yourself in vulnerable positions where you set audacious goals and you achieved them. Like those things inspire us so much. And I just really appreciate you taking the time to be on this podcast. I think we're all so much better uh, for hearing this conversation, and so appreciate that. I hope to maybe make you a three-peat guest on the Work Ready podcast at some point.
Yeah,
So,
man, anytime.
but thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for joining us again, Rob Jones. We're so grateful, and until next time, keep working hard and remain work ready. Thanks so much.
Roger that.